All right, here we go with another of our Wednesday, or what is this? Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. That's what the hell we're doing. Anyway, Dacian Miller here from Warrior Concepts. Welcome to another episode. This is actually part one of a two-part series. This week and next week, we're going to take a look at throwing, right? So this week, we're going to take a look at three phases or breaking training models down into three parts, right? So basically, three phases of a throw. We're going to take a look at, again, breaking down models, kata, whatever you want to call them, right? That are teaching a throwing technique so that we're not all caught up in just this one way of doing things, okay? So this episode, part one, we're looking at the three parts of a throw and some other things that kind of go along with that we need to set up. And then next week in part two, we're going to look at the 3 to 5 biggest mistakes that students make when they're trying to learn how to do a throw, or when they're engaged in like sparring or randori or whatever, when they're trying to execute these things. Okay, so let's take a look at that next week. All right. But before we begin, I need to address a couple of things here. One, I hear all the time from people who think that they've got this topic like all wrapped up, all sewn up. They don't need this, right? They don't need all this fight science BS, whatever. And sometimes that's literally what they put in comments. Okay, what you need to do is just put some gloves on, just go bash people in the face, and figure it out that way, right? And I get it. That's an intuitive type of learning, right? But I also understand some people are just naturally athletic. They're naturally body aware. That's how they're already pre-wired. They're already pretty intuitive, right? So these people can sort those things out really, really fast, right? Now, when it comes to teaching the same thing, it's really hard to teach intuitive action to somebody who maybe isn't so body aware or isn't so coordinated or whatever, but they still have a need for this stuff, right? So do you need it? No, right? Not if you can figure it out on your own. But I also understand that uh, there's there are some people that are just so arrogant and single-minded that they think they've got it all wrapped up. They think that their way of doing not just self-defense or fighting, but anything, right, is the only way, not only the only way, the only right way to do it. Okay. They're not open to anything else. And this type of person, when they seek out teachers or they seek out help, if they even venture that far, because most of them figure they can do it themselves, right? But if they were to seek out a teacher or a church or a school or anything, right? Um, they tend to seek out people who are going to teach them how to do what they already know and believe in better, right? So since they're not willing to expand their perspectives, what ends up happening is they're trying to be like everybody else but better. They're trying to fight like everybody else but better, right? And that's fine if you're in a sport contest where everybody's doing the same thing. As a matter of fact, that's one of the rules, right? I can't get into a boxing ring and shoot somebody in the face, right? I can't get into a boxing ring and throw kicks, right? There's a structure and that's fine. We just can't. Well, people can do whatever they want, especially grown-ups, right? One of my teachers used to always say, "You're a grown-up. You can do whatever you want." Okay, but those who know better, right, and know the topic much more deeply, would probably recommend that you don't do half the shit that you're doing. But um, again, there's a structure. But if we have any kind of even a modicum of wisdom, we're not going to confuse a structured activity, a structured event, a structured contest with this other thing, right? So anyway, I got some notes laid out for you. Again, there was so much to this when some folks asked me about some tips and things like that for making throws better, right? As I was jotting all this stuff out, it just became so big that in the confines of this format, it just became impossible to do it all in one. So we split it. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to grab one of our little mandala. Right? So I get it. This is not a Mikyo class. This is not a I don't know. Everybody here wants to learn how to do self-defense and where do I put my foot and where do I put my hand. But it's about tactics and strategies. And sometimes that has to do with learning as well. Okay. So for those of you who train with me, you get this stuff, right? Or you get the references because I'm always making them. Okay. So there's two mandalas, this one and then there's the one behind me over here. They're just two reflections of the same thing and they're used slightly differently because of perspective. Okay. So while there's many ways to look at and translate, right, this thing that looks like it just has a butt ton of images and you got to sort it out, right? There's a logic and a rationale to this based on literally brain wiring. Okay, so this was all before Freud and all these psychiatrists and psychologists that figured out the stuff from a Western science standpoint, right? But this is mind science. Okay, so here's the thing, right? This again, there's many ways to translate this, and there's many ways to come at it, right? Concentric circles, all kinds of things, right? Where the gates lay out and moving from one area to another, and what each one represents, whatever. Okay, so we're going to break this into three parts. Okay, this center column. If we break this into three columns, the center column right here, okay, represents enlightenment or wisdom or understanding about whatever the given topic is that we're studying or whatever it is that the problem we're trying to solve or whatever. Okay. So it's wisdom, enlightenment, understanding. But this comes into being because of the relationship between these other two. Okay. I'm trying to keep the reflection off of this, right? Not that you need to be able to see into detail. You just need to be able to see the dividing lines here, right? Okay. So on this side, what we have is book smarts. Okay. And I'm paraphrasing, right? We have book smarts. So when I talk about fight science and I talk about strategies and tactics and processes and the way our brains process things and whatnot, and the more that we can understand how that happens and the way those things work, and the way human beings are wired and different personality types do things and all that, that's over here, right? So when you sign on for this, or you sign on for one of our Kuden podcasts on Mondays, or our Ninja Motivation and Influence program, or something like that, right? You're getting the book smarts part of it, even though we're not giving you a book, right? You're getting the stuff that feeds the intellect, right? But in most of my programs, you're also getting an assignment, right? In martial arts, that's work, right? You're doing the rolling, or you're doing the sparring, or you're doing the interactive stuff with another body or multiple bodies or whatever, right? So this column over here represents experiential knowledge. Okay, so we have this and we put it to work. I mean, we have it and we're learning it. Okay, but inevitably it's flawed. Okay. There's a guy named Blakely, a couple of decades or a century ago or whatever, that said that, I mean, again, I'm going to paraphrase, right? Any report or any write-up or description or whatever from a less intelligent person, right? Or someone lower on the education level, when they're trying to describe something that somebody who's clever or more intelligent or more knowing in that realm, when they're reporting on that or they're summarizing it or they're feeding it back, okay, it's always going to be flawed because the way they write it down or the way they remember it, that's going to be what they're going to do is they're going to translate it into a way that they can understand it. Okay. When I go back and look at all my notes when I was a white belt or early on and things like that, from this level now, I look at that and I have to fix things because I wrote it down the way I saw it. I wrote it down the way I understood it. Okay. Which is why I always tell my upper level people, you've got to go back and review your lower level techniques because your assumption that you learned it and you got it from that level and that understanding and that perspective. But how many things have you learned between then and now that would make that technique way more powerful because you're not doing it like a white belt anymore. You're not doing it like a green belt anymore. You're not doing it like a shodan anymore. Okay. So the idea with what the model is depicting this way is that when what we understand intellectually about any given thing matches our experience, our experiential knowledge with it, right? Our street smarts match our book smarts equally about that topic, then we could say that you're enlightened about it or you're wise about it or whatever because you understand it from both realms. What we run into with the you don't need that fight science BS kind of stuff is somebody has a bunch of this, and I get it, right? But they have an aversion to learning this. And that's just the opposite of somebody who runs around and watches a whole bunch of YouTube videos or reads a whole bunch of books and has dabbled a little bit, right? And they assume that they know because they've seen it. I've seen that demonstration. I've sat through that lecture, whatever, right? But they've never put it to use. Okay. No offense to my university professor friends, but you got university professors that are teaching business management, but have never owned a business. So this is theory. This is shit. I never thought of that. Okay. I didn't even know that happened. Okay. The best professors have done both, right? And they're teaching from a perspective of experience. Okay. These guys, they have an extra benefit too when they understand the things that are going on that most people don't even know happen. Okay. So I don't want to jump into this too much. In a previous Kuden, I outlined something in our Mikyo, in our esoteric philosophy behind all this stuff, where the mandala come from. There's this one body of knowledge, and it's a framework, and it's called the 4 Foundations of Transcendent Intention. And what it lays out is how an enlightened path for learning things, right? So you have an interest in something, and you know some things about it because you've encountered it, right? But the enlightened perspective is that it's flawed, right? Because you've only looked at things, you've only seen things done, right? I could watch a teacher demonstrate a technique and go, well, that's pretty cut and dry. And then as soon as I start touching somebody else's body and encounter resistance and balance problems and coordinations for myself, timing, distancing, angling, all those kind of things, I start to recognize, shit, there's a whole bunch of stuff that, a whole bunch of information I don't get by watching a demonstration. Okay. And it's hard enough in the dojo when the teacher can come over and help correct. How much more difficult is it when you're watching a 2-dimensional video, right? And they're not changing angles and all that kind of stuff, right? So the experience then gives me some things to think about, right? I start recognizing, oh, I misunderstood that. Oh, this isn't exactly this way. Oh, that's shit. I need to learn that so I can do this. And then that leads to this area of study, investigation, analysis, mindfulness, whatever. Okay. Just like people sign on for these things and then sign off because they don't want to hear this, right? What they want are some quick tips because they need to be entertained quickly, or they just want it in quick 30-second digestible kind of things. But then they watch YouTube shorts and assume that little thing, right, for a couple of seconds that I demonstrated, they assume they've got the whole thing. And then they throw some kind of comment on that just is full of holes, but they can't see the holes because, again, they're translating what they see based on their experience, their understanding, whatever. Okay. And I'm not here to fix that. Okay. I'm way okay with people wallowing in their own ignorance, but thinking they're intelligent, because unless they're a student of mine, I don't have any personal responsibility for them. So when they come at me, they're going to run into all of those gaps in their understanding and ability, and they're going to run into their arrogance and their assumptions about me and how I'm built and what I'm able to do because of it, and those kind of, and that's perfectly okay. Okay, so as Hatsumi Sensei and several of the Japanese master teachers have said, you can't re-educate the masses, and you shouldn't want to. Okay, because their ignorance is going to serve you, especially when they're coming at you with damaging or murderous intent. Okay, so this is important. All right. And and again, we could talk about throws from the perspective of verbal judo and things like that, where you're able to throw somebody off balance. And I don't mean physically, right? I mean like lock them up in with their own brain, right? There's anything that we do physically, punching, locks, holds, restraints, throws, those kind of things, right? They have mirrors. They have equivalents in verbal, right? Arguments. They have equivalents in emotional and spiritual conflict, those kind of things, right? And so wherever we stop, wherever the definition of the training stops for us, well, that's where our abilities are going to stop. Okay, so ninjutsu is supposed to be a life thing. So anyway, I'm going to jump off of that. So if you're interested in the rest of that 4-phase process about how to learn something better, faster, more efficiently, that kind of thing, based on natural human mental functioning, then check out the Kuden on the 4 foundations. Anyway, all right. So let's start with the concept of throwing. Right, we're going to define throwing because most people think of like judo throws or whatever. Right, but I want to make sure that we're on the same sheet of music. Okay, so to speak. Right. So I apologize. I don't have a pretty outline like I did last time. I want to shout out and thank my student Caden, who he's well into the educational system and whatnot. I think he's been living in Japan for a couple of decades now. Anyway, he gave me a whole bunch of suggestions because he's a educator and whatnot on a better use of the whiteboard and the way to lay things out better so that you guys can function a little bit better. My schedule just really, really busy today, and I didn't get a chance to set it up. Okay, tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, I'm doing a free virtual training event as a kickoff, yes, pun intended, to relaunch our online Ninjutsu training program, coaching long distance students and things like that. We're reformatting and things like that. I'm just doing a free training to kind of give things away and then kind of explain for folks, because next week we kick off this new format and it comes with weekly lessons and all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of tied up with things in 3 different directions at the moment. So I apologize for kind of slipping back to just kind of scribbling on the board, but I'll do the best I can. All right. So if we look at the concept of this idea of throwing, right, in Japanese, it's nage. Okay. And I highly recommend that you look up the kanji and look at the way that kanji is defined, because you'll see that there's different perspectives to these things. Okay, but we're going to look at 3. Right, I like to break things down into at least 3 aspects. Okay, so when we think of throwing, right, and how somebody might be thrown or how someone might throw another human being, right, really comes down to kind of 3 different things. One's a lot more just gross caveman like. When I say gross, I don't mean like disgusting. I mean like just big and rough, around the edges and things like that. To a more scientific way to do it, to much more subtle, right? Much more ninja-like. Okay, so the first one is you literally grab someone, right? Pick them up and throw them. Okay, this requires size and strength. Okay. Big guy. I've got a guy in my dojo. He's 6'5", probably 350. He lost some weight, so 340, whatever. When he first came to me, he was 375. Big hands. Like he could grab you by the face or the neck and literally just lift you up, right? And toss you away from him. Okay. That's what I mean, right? So somebody bigger, stronger, whatever, just picking somebody up and just just literally throwing them, right? There's a story from Hatsumi Sensei about his teacher, Takama Sensei. So, way back, right? Takama Sensei was young, and he was, I can't remember where he was living, but he was on a pier, right? Ships unloading and loading freight and things like that, right? And ended up in this little altercation with a drunk merchant sailor, whatever, right? Guy's really, really huge, right? And at one point, this guy picks little Takamasa Sensei up over his head to slam him down on the pier. Okay, so we're not talking about any kind of martial prowess. We're talking about, yes, pick him up and throw him down. Okay, now the story ends with this guy losing an eye because Takamasa Sensei, when he thought he was going to go, didn't realize what he was doing instinctively, right? And what ended up happening was one of his fingers or his thumb or whatever found this guy's eye socket and reached in, right? And all he heard was, just when he thought he was going to be slammed down on the deck on this pier, right? He heard this guy scream out and his knees buckle, and he didn't get put down very hard. And then this guy's holding his face and blood's running out and all that. And he looked down and he had this squished eyeball in his hand. Okay. So, but the point here is the throw, right? He was being picked up and literally freaking tossed like a sack of potatoes, bag of rice, whatever. Okay. So, but to do this requires size and strength, right? We've got to be the bigger, stronger opponent, right? Or combatant. Okay. Number two, right, is catching and I'm going to call it catching and scooping. Okay. So catching and scooping, right? So what we're doing is we're catching this person based on balance and all that, getting in and then dumping or flipping them. A lot of people call judo throws flips, those kind of things, right? This requires opportunity, okay, and leverage. Okay, so it requires more skill. I mean, it requires a sense of timing and knowing when that's happening, right? Leverage, right? Getting my hips below his and being able to catch this heavy human body and bring it over, right? That kind of thing. Okay, so this requires more prowess and more, more skill, right? And then the third one, and this is my favorite, and this is how I define how we throw. Now, can we do these? Of course, right? Depends on what you're dealing with, who you're dealing with, whatever, right? I mean, somebody might make the mistake of being scrawny and coming up and wanting to do something, and it's you can do things, or you can come in from underneath. There's one kata, I can't remember the name of it. I've worked on it in Ishizuka Sensei's dojo, and how many kata in all these lineages, right? Anyway, at a certain point, you come up, you're on the center line, and you come up from underneath, and you grab the windpipe. In training, we just do it like this and apply pressure to the side of the windpipe. But for real, you come up with this kind of a fist, shoving on either side of the windpipe, and then come around from both sides and make a boshiken in an upward direction. So it's not all about you being strong, because his survival mechanism, right, that goes 180 degrees away from pain and all that, is going to help, okay? But I'm coming up and lifting this guy up, and then when I let go, he's down and either gagging or choking or out or whatever, okay? So it's not that we don't have things like this, right? But you need this to do it, because I know I'm a heavier guy. I'm not a tall guy. I'm only 5'6" and change. Okay, so which makes me under the average height for an American and way under height for my Australian friends. Right, I've met your average. I'm not it. Okay, so and then the third one is let's see. Right, I'm using the word creating here. Right, I'm creating a situation. Okay, where he can no longer stand up. Okay, I'm making it easy for him to fall down. Okay, so what this requires is, again, opportunity. We're going to use leverage, but what it doesn't require is strength. It doesn't require that I scoop him up. It doesn't require form, right? This is more of an expedient. Okay, I'll give you an example of this. Okay, one of the throws that we teach, right, is seonage. Okay, grab a different pen here. Okay, seonage. Just as an expedient, right? Seonage. It's one of these shoulder throws. Okay, in judo, it's called ippon seonage. For those of you with judo or jiujitsu backgrounds, right? Ippon seonage. Ippon means 1 point, right? We don't use that word because we're not giving points for proper execution of a technique, okay? But it's kind of a shoulder throw, right? So you're squared off with this guy, you have him, you shift in under, hips below, and you bring him over, right? It's this just a basic over the shoulder kind of throw kind of thing, right? So when I teach students how to do this to begin with, what I do is I do it almost like an arm snag kind of thing. So they reach out to punch or grab, and I shift in and lock against that arm, and then sidestep around. So he ends up coming across my side. But what it does is it stretches him out and moves him off the side of one foot and the heel of the other one. So he loses everything, right? He loses the battle with gravity. He loses the battle with inertia. Okay. So we can build up to this, but you really have to have this guy to get this, right? But there's a kind of and I don't know if that version that I have has a different name or whatever. And in all honesty, I don't care. Okay. So we just call it a lead into a seonage or a variation, right? And all throws are variations of each other anyway. Okay. So this idea with creating a situation where he can no longer stand up, okay? And to do that, right, all we have to understand is that there's an alignment. Switch color here, right? Okay. There's an alignment between your hip, your knee, and your ankle. I know, I gave them cankles. Anyway, narrow that out a little bit more, right? Ankle, okay? That allows you as a human being to stand up, okay? The better you can manage this, the more on balance, the more stable you will be. Getting somebody to fall down is as simple as misaligning two or more of these joints. If I can get the hip off the knee ankle line, if I can move the knee out of alignment with the ankle and the hip, I can roll the ankle over, right? And then again, it's in alignment with the center of the body. So if I move that a little bit one way or the other, right? So this is kind of a lead in, right? And it's more of an expedient. I don't know what the hell I did with his toes, but anyway, you get the idea. Okay? I hope you get the idea anyway. Okay. So again, there's different ways to do it, but what really matters here is, do we understand what's going on and what kind of skill proficiency we need, okay? Because if I were a judoka, right, a judo practitioner, and I'm in a judo match with another judoka, we're in kumyuch, and there's this pushing and pulling and all that, and we're trying to trip each other or trying to throw each other, whatever. We're both trying to do the same thing, and so therefore we're both defending against the same kind of entry and all that, right? And there's a ref to make sure that like my hand doesn't slip off and punch him in the jaw, and then now that he's off balance, I can step in and do a rear hip throw or whatever, right? Okay. But there's a huge difference, right? The problem is that self-defense is not the same as these contests, right? That are limited or have limitations and structures. Okay. And I don't care if it's a boxing match, if it's a judo match. I get it. MMA tries to get as close as possible, but shit, there's a list of like 31 things, and some of those line items, right, have multiple things on it. So if I break them out, there's closer to 50 things that you can't do in an MMA match without getting disqualified. That, yeah, it can be done on the street, either by you or to you. And if we're not factoring those things in, then we're training in a box, and assuming that those other things are never going to come at us. Okay, kind of like the people that argue with me when I'm doing a wrist grab escape or whatever, that nobody grabs wrist, man. No one in your world has ever grabbed you by a wrist. Luckily, you've always fought people that fight like you do, and you've never thought of grabbing a wrist. Okay, but the rest of us, meanwhile, back in reality, okay, have different experiences. So we're learning defenses against things that we know occur. Okay. So anyway, all right. So here's the thing about self-defense, right? It's open-ended. It's limited only by the options and skill sets or willingness, right, of the attacker and defender. Okay. How broadly or deeply can you think about things? And it's based on survival, not on bragging rights, not on awards, wins or losses. Okay. The teachers in Japan, especially like Nagato Sensei, a couple of them, right? They have this phrase, right? They'll remind us on a regular basis, okay? Because they'll see people like struggling to make something specific happen, right? Like you got to put the guy on the ground or whatever, right? Because that somehow mentally scores a win, right? And what they always say is, you don't have to win, just don't lose. Right? Which really screws people up because, well, if I'm not losing, then I won. Yeah, no. Okay, if I can talk my way out of this and we both go home safe, there was no winner, there was no loser, right? However, there was no violence, no damage, whatever, no bad karma, right? So it's this idea of imperatively needing to win or fear of loss that can really change things. Okay. All right. So again, let's jump into this thing. Well, we've been jumping into it, but I needed a lot of setup because next week when we talk about these mistakes that people make, it's important that we understand where we're coming from. So I'm going to outline these three parts of when I promoted the class, or when I told everybody what the thing was about. What I laid out was three parts of a throw, or three phases of a throw. But that was an expedient because of the way most people think about it. What I'm really talking about is three phases or three parts, right, of a throwing model, right? A throwing model, throwing kata, throwing technique, whatever word you want to come up with, right? It's these preset kind of things that people are initiated into to learn how to do the move, okay? And then they have names, right? Ganseki Nage, Hane Gosh, Seo Nage, whatever, right? They have these names, but the name points to the thing you're doing to them, okay? It's the actual thing. Not the whole model isn't the throw. Okay. So the model has three parts. Okay. Change this color out here for a little bit of contrast, right? So the model has three parts. Okay. There's, in Japanese, it's called iri, right? Which means entering. You are not throwing the person. You're not even catching the person. What you're doing is moving into a position where you can catch the person, but your options are still open. When I'm entering, the throw is a potential at the moment, and that's what I might be entering for. But as I'm entering, things may change, and it just turns into a situation where I just punch him in the hip, or I hit him, or whatever, right? And then I need to bail out because things change, okay? For those of you in Bujinkan, Ninjutsu, Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu, again, you play whatever name game you want to play. That's what the Sanshi no Kata are all about. Sanshi no Kata are about entering. They're about penetration, okay? How do I enter in against his defenses and in a way where I can deliver the strike that's being taught in that particular model in a way where he can't defend against it, he can't avoid it, escape from it, or whatever, and I can be successful in landing it. Right? I know it just looks like a simple, except which transmission level are we talking about with these 5 models? Okay. So one part of the model is entering. It's teaching you how to break his grip, create an open channel, an alley, a pathway, or whatever that you can begin to enter in to catch him. Okay. So this is it's not the throw. Okay. The second part, okay, is dori. Okay. Dori. Okay. Not the blue fish in Finding Nemo. Okay. Dori. Right. Dori means to catch or seize. To take. Okay. So dori is the part where you're connecting your body to theirs and extends into catching their motion. I'll talk about this here in a bit, right? We'll definitely talk about it way more next week, okay? But what I'm doing here is I'm catching them. I'm catching their body, certain body parts. I'm catching their momentum, their action, their direction, that kind of thing. But it's not the throw yet, okay? It's the beginning of the throw, but it's not the execution of the throw. Next week, when we talk about these mistakes that people make, here's where the problem becomes, because they go and they try to jump on things. And that now, because they don't have the person's balance broken or anything like that, they end up in a wrestling match, or they're trying to muscle it, or it gets countered on them or whatever. And they don't know what the hell is going wrong, because to them, they're doing exactly the same moves that the teacher's doing. But even if they're doing the same physical moves, maybe not. Again, what was that comment I made earlier, that quote from Blakely, right? Based on their level of understanding and the way they're going to translate it, they're going to translate it so they understand it, but they don't understand at the same level that the teacher does, or they could do it to the same degree the teacher does. That's the litmus test, right? Can you duplicate what the teacher does? Okay. So again, and I'm going to come back and talk about what's important here, right? But here we're getting a hold of them physically, directionally, energy-wise, that kind of thing. And then, right, then the third part is the Japanese word just dropped out of my head, right? I'm just going to call it execution or application. Execution or application. That means I'm tossing his ass. Okay? He's leaving my body in the direction that I need him to go. Okay? Not in control of himself. Okay? Now, in the beginning, I just talked to some students last night in a class about kata and transition and things like that. Was it last night? Yeah, last night. My long distance guys, we were talking about joint locks, wrist reversals, shoulder manipulation, those kind of things, right? And 3 ways to use them, okay, or 3 ways to apply them, right? So in the model, you're always learning, like, here's how to go about doing this, right? So, and it doesn't matter. You could learn the Gyoko way to do it. You could learn the Koto way to do it. You could learn the Tagagi Yoshin way, whatever, right? But you're learning how to lock the wrist, lock the shoulder, whatever, whether it's Musha, Dori, Onikudaki, Omote Gyaku, Hongyaku, Taki, whatever, right? Okay. So, but the way the model is taught, right, from base level, first transmission, all these models, whether it's a throw or those locks or holds or whatever, are always taught from, well, historically, traditionally, the way the model is built, not necessarily the way a teacher might teach it if they don't understand this little piece of information, right? The way the models are put together, it's so that both people can practice. It's not so one guy can hold on or punch or grab or whatever, and then the other person pulls some whoop ass. Okay? One person is learning how to take effectively, so the other person has to learn how to efficiently and effectively break that grip, diminish their power without getting slammed, right? So if I'm being grabbed on my center line, single-handed this way, right, and he has me, right, where he can break my balance in one way or the other, or he can pull on my clothing and slam into the bones with his knuckles or whatever, right? I'm learning how to take this so he can't bang on it, right? I'm learning how to write off any initial kind of thing so that that neutralizes it. And then my first job is to get off that line. So if he pushes or pulls, he's pushing or pulling parallel to my body. And he's, because my power line is on his power line. So I've neutralized that. If I half ass it and do this, it doesn't matter that I step back. If he shuffles in and pushes, he can break my balance. If he stabilizes and sinks and pulls, he can break my balance. I need to be able to neutralize this because that's not the wrist reversal yet. That's right. That's him taking me. I need to neutralize the taking. So later on, when we're countering throws, we need to know how to counter each of these phases. Wherever he happens to be, I happen to be in the throw. Okay. So what I was covering with them was once we get the joint locked, we have choice. The model begins with the most passive way to do it, where we're doing it as a takedown. It's a control. So the lock begins breaking balance, and then my footwork and body movement brings the guy to the ground. I restrain him, those kind of things, because we're in the dojo, right? But that sets me up for having one of three minimum options out on the street or at the family picnic. And I think that the example I gave was drunk Uncle Bob is acting up again, right? And he's crossed a line, and I need to calm. And he takes a punch, grabs a hold, whatever, and I whip one of these things on him, and I want to lay him down, get him into a restraint, right? Calm him down, whatever. Okay. I don't want to dislocate his shoulder because whether we all think it's cool, right? It's drunk Uncle Bob. At least Aunt Minnie and the rest of a bunch of the other parts of the family, not going to appreciate that I damn near crippled drunk Uncle Bob, regardless of whether he deserved it or not. Okay. So I need this option of being able to have something that's geared down. I'm using the joint manipulation to do something where it just controls the person, right? I can use the control, or I can use it as a way to jam up his body so that I'm going to do something else, right? We have kata where you're doing a mushadori and then you're snapping out the knee, right? Because he's resisting or whatever. So you're locking him up so that you can do this other thing. There's other ones where you're doing an omote gyaku to bend him this way, and then you do a toe stab to the kidney to drop him to the ground, right? So again, I'm not just pulling the shit out of my ass. There's models that reflect these things if we understand the kotsu, the essential nature of any given move inside of a kata or the kata itself. Anyway, back to this. So I could lock him up to control him, or I could lock him up and then break that joint. Okay. So, and of course, the more options I have, right? This is not about personal preference. This is about what situation am I in, right? I'm going to do this control, omote gyaku, throw, whatever, and this guy reaches into a friggin' hoodie pocket and pulls out a blade or a gun. I need to snap him because just laying him down to where he might, it doesn't matter that I laid him on the ground. Okay. He can swipe at my legs. He can shoot me in the face from on the ground, whatever. Okay. I need to be able to have options in a given situation. So learning the model is just the start. Okay. And the more places in there that we have now we can break this out and just do this. We can break this out and just do this, right? This Friday virtual class, right? This is the kind of stuff we're going to be taking a look at, right? We're going to take a look at drills and ways to we're going to look at a couple of throws and understand these pieces, okay? So that we can start leaning toward next week. Now, of course, this Friday, if you're in on for the Friday virtual class, you're going to get heads up on next week's thing because by its very nature, we're going to have to be pointing out mistakes that people make. Okay. So anyway, what do I have in here? Okay. So, Iri, we're going to do one more pass through this before we wrap things up, right? And then remember these notes for next week if you don't make it for Friday's class. Okay. So, entering, okay. Entering is partly about balance breaking, right? So, Kazushi, bless you, right? Kazushi, right? So, this could be physical, right? Unbalanced this way, right? But Kazushi is not just physical unbalance. And the more methods of unbalance you can do that you have options for again, right? Then you can create these gaps, right? Where he can't get at you. And the more you can do in any given moment, the harder it is for him to recover, right? We did one of these Whiteboard Wednesdays a couple of weeks ago as a two-part series, but part two was controlling his perceptions and things like that. And we were talking about physical contact, right? And affecting the proprioceptors, right? That feed the brain information, right? So we can confuse it, we can lock it up, we can give it too much to be able to handle, so it can't decide, right? Part one was about visual, right? Information that we're sending to the brain, right? So the more of these that you can be operating with at the same time, right? And again, I'm going to get people that are like, "This is bullshit, man. You don't need that. Put gloves on, punch him in the face, whatever." That's fine. There's also going to be other people that sign off because this is too much. I don't have to think about that shit. Okay. And there's going to be other people that are just sitting there doing this. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Take notes. But add this to training. The problem is that they don't train enough. So they're going to forget about it in a couple of hours, couple of minutes, couple of days, whatever, and they're not going to act on it either, which is why the upper levels of mastery are so thin. Okay? People have an interest in things. They start learning about it. They start experiencing it, and they have this gut level or mental laziness kind of thing that kicks in that, spoken or not, outwardly or inwardly or not, or it's just a feeling that it's too much hard work, right? What's the minimum that I can learn that'll get me the belt or that'll make me feel good that, I can tell myself whatever story I want. It's that red pill, blue pill kind of thing, right? So anyway, Kazushi, right? So this could be distraction, which is mental Kazushi. It's mental unbalancing. Could be taking advantage of gaps, like when he's missing with a shot, whatever, okay? So he doesn't have to physically be off balance, but he has to be in a condition where he can't stop you. He can't block you. He can't hit you while you're moving in, okay? So this is about gaps, right? Mental, emotional, physical, whatever, okay? Dori. There's two ways to look at Dori, right? And I break it down with two C's: catch or create. And create will always loop back to catch anyway. But what we're looking at here is if he's in motion, I'm catching that motion in that direction. So both of these require ritsudo. Right? Ritsudo is timing. But more specifically, it's rhythm, right? It's being able to fit in with what he's doing, okay? So with catching, he's already in motion. He's giving me something, right? He's an accomplice to his own ass kicking. So he's going to give me something that I can catch. But if he's not giving me something, then I have to create it. So I have to understand how to do that. I have to understand how to affect him by using his own moral response, right? That kind of thing. Or his own flinch response or his oppositional defiant disorder, right? We all have it, where if I push on him, he fires muscles to push back, or if I pull on him, he fires muscles. He doesn't think about pushing or pulling, he's just resisting it. But if I'm pulling on him, his resistance is pulling in the opposite direction. If I'm pressing on him, his resistance is pressing into it, right? So it's still a push-pull. So I know that if I push on something, he'll push back, and I can catch that thing that he's now doing, right? If I pull on him, okay, if I push on him and he rides it off, see, that's what we learn how to do, right? So we borrow his, okay? So I have to make sure that he can't catch me while I'm trying to catch him, okay? But as soon as I create that thing that I need, then I can catch that and send him on his way, okay? So this is about, again, it's about understanding moral response, flinch response, those kind of things, and not just trickery, right? This is not just about that. Anybody that's ever read the first book that came out in English on ninjutsu, not Don Drager's stuff, whatever, which was partially fabricated. The first one that came out by Stephen Hayes was The Ninja and Their Secret Fighting Art, right? And it kind of outlines, it's kind of in story form, when he went to Japan, first met Hatsumi Sensei and Tanemura Sensei, who became his first teacher, the guy that broke away and founded the Genbukan. There's in that first meeting, right? There's a little, and they didn't do a throw, but they did this punch thing that Heisan wrote off as a trickery. It was like a psych out, right? And what Hatsumi Sensei said was, "Oh, is that what you think happened?" And it wasn't until he trained for a long time that he realized, oh, this goes way deeper than just doing some adolescent, teenage trickery kind of thing, right? Because a trick only works if you confuse him. What if you don't, okay? Trickery requires his left brain higher functions paying attention. What I need to attack is subconscious, unconscious reflex that's already hardwired. So even if his left brain knows what's going on, it can't stop it because I'm triggering something that occurs long before the left brain knows it's happening. So by the time the left brain knows it's happening, it's too late. One of my guys, I reference him on a regular basis, Shidoshi Paul. He's the one who passed away almost a year ago now. We'd be doing something in class, and right in the middle of a technique, he'd start chuckling, and it would throw students off, right? And I'd dump him or whatever. And students would look at him like, what are you laughing about, right? And he would say, I know exactly what he's doing. I just can't stop it when he's doing it. By the time I know he's doing it, it's too late. And now I can't stop it. Okay? That's a cool thing. It's not about tricking the thing that we think we're smart with. It's tricking the system that's always operating, regardless of whether you know intellectually or not. That's some cool shit. Okay? And then the execution, right? This is about guiding, right? It's about guiding. Oh, what else did I write down here? It's about guiding. Again, understanding that moral response and activity, right? And understanding the big thing with understanding here. I'm just writing out understanding, okay? Because there's a lot to be understood. But the big thing here is understanding where he will be when he gets where he's going, so you can prevent that from happening. Because at every point in your throw, subconsciously, unconsciously, from muscle memory, the body is trying to right itself. So if I step and throw him on the direction that he's going, his body will instinctively step a foot on that line to not fall down. It's how we catch ourselves every time we slip or trip. You don't think about where your foot goes. You slip and your foot or body repositions on center in whatever weird position you have to catch your balance. I need to know where that foot will step to catch him. And then before it happens, I adjust my direction so when he puts his foot down, he's wrong. So the balance line changes at least once, if not more, during the execution of the throw. And the problem that most people have, and again, we'll talk about this next week, is they don't understand that. And so they're forcing it like it's a forward hip throw, so I'm throwing him forward. Well, if I toss him forward on his own balance line, he will step on that line and catch himself. If I know that, then I can meet him and make that wrong. Okay. Now, in a full speed fit, you have to be so good at that and understand it that it ends up going from intellect to intuitive, so that you just end up doing the throw a certain way based on that knowledge, because at full speed, you can't track his foot. It's going to happen really fast. So the way you execute the throw takes that into account, right? And makes it harder and harder for him to catch himself. And then he needs to do ukemi, which is what the base model teaches him to do. So I need to be able to do this so effectively and efficiently so that during the throw, my next move is not holding on to the throw. It's attacking his ukemi so he can't take it. Because if he can take ukemi, he can roll, catch himself, kip up, whatever, be back into the fight. Shit, right? Why don't you just die? Right? Okay, like they say in the movies. Okay, so again, all these things bleed together, kind of like gears, right, that are matched up, or jigsaw puzzle pieces, or whatever. Again, took a bit to go through this. Hopefully, it was valuable. But again, 3 parts, right, to any model. Throwing, or not throwing, entering, right? Iri, entering, dori, to catch him and seize him, right? To lock him to you. And then the actual execution of the application, okay? And the name of the kata, the name of the model, is typically floating in here, right? It's not this. You have to do this correctly to enter in to be able to do what the kata is pointing to, okay? A lot of kata names are that way. Right? There's some aspect or crux of the action that the model, that the kata is pointing to, that is based on the name. Okay. Anyway, that's what I have. Hopefully it was valuable. And if it was, hopefully you'll sign up for the Friday virtual training. And if not, hopefully you'll make it for next week's part 2. And if you're catching these things on recording, then if you're fairly close to this one, you'll have to wait for next week. And if not, you just click on the next one, and we'll try to remember to put a link in the description to jump you right to the next episode. But either way, right? Hopefully this was valuable. Daishihan Miller here from Warrior Concepts. I'll see you next time on Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday.